Hey guys, tonight we're traveling far, far from the noise and neon of the modern world out to the great windswept steppes of Eurasia. You're there now, boots sawless caked with dust, the sky a vast ocean above you. Somewhere in the distance, a falcon arcs through a pale sunbeam, and your horse snorts softly, sensing a storm or a story. This is no sleepy corner of the earth tonight. You've just stumbled into the heart of the Mongol Empire, where whispers travel faster than arrows, and news can cross continents without a single raised voice. Of course, if you were really here. In the 13th century, you probably wouldn't survive the week. Between the wolves, warlords, and digestive surprises of fermented mare's milk, things get dicey. But you've got the best seat snug in bed. Brain curious but sleepy, and no real chance of being conscripted. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling extra friendly, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the empire. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a Mongol outpost, a lonely smudge of tents and smoke on a horizon that never ends. Behind you, a bonfire crackles. Ahead, a weary horse trots in, foam tracing its sides, its rider barely conscious. Another courier arrives. Just one of thousands. The message he carries: you don't know. You're not supposed to. These men aren't town criers. They're the opposite: silent, swift, trained like arrows to fly straight and not shout about it. In the days of Genghis Khan, yes, that Genghis, the one who allegedly fathered a statistically eyebrow-raising portion of Central Asia's population, the ability to communicate across his expanding empire wasn't just a convenience. It was survival. Controlling an empire that stretched from the Sea of Japan to the edges of Eastern Europe meant your messages had to move faster than your armies. Enter the couriers. Genghis didn't invent mounted message delivery. Of course, cultures before him had experimented with postal relays, from the Persians under Cyrus the Great to the Tang dynasty in China. But Genghis? He didn't just refine the idea, he supercharged it. Imagine a system where every 25 to 30 miles or so, you could pull up to a rest stop, ditch your foaming horse, grab a fresh one, slam a dumpling or two, and ride again, all without changing out of your increasingly funky riding boots. This wasn't a Pony Express of hobbyists. It was an engineered network of communication hubs across some of the roughest terrain on Earth. And it started right here, at this humble way station where tired men trade horses and rumors with barely a word spoken. The Mongols called it the Yam system. More on that name later. But for now, all you need to know is that you're standing on the spine of something enormous, a living, breathing artery of empire. The first couriers were often chosen from elite ranks. Some were even nobility, entrusted with scrolls wrapped in silk, or tokens carved with imperial seals. Each bore the weight of empire on their saddle. It's a little more high stakes than being stuck behind the counter at FedEx. And you're the newest recruit. Or maybe just a fly on the saddlebag, watching it all unfold as your horse shifts beneath you in the wind. Whistles like ancient flutes through the grass. Messages weren't just relayed once. They were passed from hand to hand, station to station, in a blur of galloping hooves and exchanged glances. Each rider had one job: get the note to the next station. No frills, no flair, no gossiping in the group chat. Just deliver. Quietly, swiftly. And here's where the Mongols were clever. They didn't demand one man ride 1,000 miles. Instead, they relied on a relay. One horse, one man, one stretch of terrain, then switch again. Like neurons firing across a colossal brain. And that brain? Genghis Khan. He envisioned a world stitched together not just by conquest, but by communication. His ordo, or royal camp, moved constantly. But thanks to the courier system, it always felt strangely everywhere. He could receive news from distant borders faster than you get a text reply from your cousin who forgot to respond. Mainstream. Historical fact. The YAM system eventually extended over 6,000 miles. Think of that: no highways, no GPS, no coffee stops, just guts, grit, and a deep respect for the curvature of the earth. But here's a fringe tidbit. Some accounts suggest that especially trusted couriers trained with eagles to sense approaching danger, or at least to keep them company in the lonesome hours. Others swear they carried small flutes or jaw harps to play under their breath, soothing horses and minds alike. Historians still argue whether the earliest iterations of the YAM borrowed more heavily from Chinese or Turkic prototypes. The Mongols borrowed and adapted from many cultures. It's one of the secrets to their stunningly fast rise. But pinning down the origin of the courier relay system feels like asking who invented the wheel while it's currently rolling over your foot. Back at your post, another courier rides in. His eyes are bloodshot, his lips cracked from the dry air. He tosses a scroll into the hands of a waiting officer and slumps off his mount, half fainting. The scroll will keep moving. He, however, is done for the night. You sit by the fire, feeling the saddle ache in your thighs, the way your nose tingles with the smoky scent of pine, horse sweat, and boiled mutton. Somewhere, someone is writing a reply to a message you helped deliver. End tomorrow. You write again. You're up before the sun. The embers from last night's fire still smolder, and your breath hangs in the cold morning air like a ghost deciding whether to stay. You stretch, swing your sore legs over a new horse, and start your next run. Today, you're not carrying just any message. This one bears the seal of the Khan himself. That means no delays, no detours, and definitely no stopping to admire particularly majestic Quietest. Your job is simple. In theory, ride hard, ride fast, and get to the next station. But the Mongol relay system, the YAM, was anything but simple in execution. It was a marvel. And now, you're a small cog in that giant thundering machine. Just 27 miles ahead is your next post. A snug little station with fresh mounts, watered hay, and maybe a bowl of curdled milk if you're lucky. These stations dot the empire like breadcrumbs across a continent, laid out with almost obsessive precision. Each is manned by workers, guarded by soldiers, stocked with food and horses, and sometimes even a scribe or two waiting to jot down an emergency letter dictated between gulps of broth. You gallop into the wind, the scroll bound in leather thumping softly against your side. The horse beneath you is lean and eager, its mane whipped back like a banner. Mongol horses aren't pretty, not by Arabian standards. They're squat, shaggy, and shaped like stubborn little tanks. But they are hardy. These ponies can eat snow, survive sandstorms, and probably out-debate most city councilmen if given the chance. The relay system's efficiency stunned outsiders. European merchants who found themselves traveling through Mongol territory, Marco Polo among them, wrote breathlessly of the speed and discipline with which messages flew across the landscape. One chronicler noted that couriers could cover 200 miles in a single day. That's faster than some modern postal services on a good week. And here's the quirky bit. Those lightning-fast runs were sometimes helped along by what historians think might have been early versions of horse GPS ribbons tied to branches to mark safe paths, or songs hummed along certain trails. You think of that now as you pass a stretch of familiar grass, where last time you sang the same three-line tune, just to stay awake. The genius of the system wasn't just the speed. It was the simplicity. Couriers didn't need maps. They didn't need to carry feed or tents. Everything was laid out for them. Every stop, every horse, every bowl of millet porridge, thanks to the enormous bureaucracy that kept the YAM running. You see the station now, a cluster of yurts, one larger than the rest. Smoke curls from the chimney. A boy runs out to take your horse's reins as you slide off the saddle and stumble into the warm, dark interior. A new horse is waiting, fed, brushed, saddled. You don't rest, you don't eat. You just drink. Half a ladle of sour kumis, wipe your mouth, and ride. Because this isn't a leisure job. You're not on some slow mail route dropping off love letters and birthday cards. You are imperial arteries, pumping knowledge and commands across the Empire's beating heart. Miss your mark, and a rebellion could fester. Deliver late, and a treaty might shatter. The whole Empire rides with you, and you're not allowed to shout about it. Historians still argue whether the relay system's design was entirely Mongol-made or borrowed piecemeal from the Persians and Chinese. The safe bet is both Genghis Khan was many things, but too proud to borrow good ideas? Never. If it worked, he used it. If it broke, he made it stronger. Now, the sun climbs higher, and your cloak flaps wildly in the wind. You pass a flock of sheep and nod at the shepherd, who waves with a face so wrinkled it could be mistaken for a historical map. He knows you're a courier. Everyone knows. You carry the peza, the official badge of passage. It glints at your neck, small but commanding. We'll talk more about that later. Your thighs ache. Your hands are stiff. You haven't slept since the last crescent moon. But you ride like the land depends on you. Because, in a weirdly literal way, it does. The horse knows this road better than you do. It leans into the wind with a rhythm born of generations of trained muscle. You almost don't have to steer. Another hour. Another station, another swap. This continues. Not just today. Not just this week. But for months, years, decades. The system outlives its riders, its founders, even its emperors. And through it all, it keeps whispering across the steppe. So tonight, as you lie back beneath a sky splattered with stars, the sound of hooves echoing in your ears, think about that relay. Think about the thousands of miles, the millions of hoofbeats, the endless line of couriers who rode not to be seen, but to be heard, but quietly. You're half asleep on horseback when the word first clicks in your brain. Yam, not the tuber. Definitely not your aunt's marshmallow-covered Thanksgiving special. This yam isn't something you eat. It's something that eats you, or at least, it devours your time, your sleep, and most of your lower back comfort. The word yam probably comes from the Mongolian word jam or zam, meaning road or route. Over time, it's come to stand for the entire relay system. A sprawling, meticulously structured network of rest stops, relay stations, and hospitality outposts spanning the length of the empire. Think of it like a giant, horse-powered internet. If every data packet had saddle sores and a mouthful of goat cheese, you're in one now. The yurt walls are thick with felt, and the air is heavy with the scent of sweat, smoke, and fermented dairy. A soldier sits at the entrance, carving a bit of wood into a whistle for no particular reason. A pot bubbles somewhere nearby, possibly stew, possibly glue. And in the center, on a low wooden table, are scrolls tied in neat silk ribbons. This is not a post office. It's a node in a living organism. Each yam station, called engrotij in some records, was carefully placed no more than 25 to 30 miles from the next. That's about a half-day ride for a determined courier, or a full-day ride for someone nursing a broken sandal and a broken heart. In the Mongol Empire, there were reportedly more than 1,000 such stations, stretching from the Yellow Sea all the way to the Danube. That's not just impressive, it's terrifyingly efficient for the 13th century. You sip from a bowl of hot, salty tea and glance around. The walls are lined with saddle blankets, spare bridles, and scroll racks that creak every time the wind shifts. This station, like most, is manned by locals who aren't technically soldiers, but might as well be. Their job? Keep the yam alive, feed the riders, rotate the horses, replace supplies, record what comes in and what goes out. It's like working at the busiest, grumpiest Waffle House in history, except instead of eggs, you're serving empire-wide military orders, mainstream historical fact, The Yam system allowed Genghis Khan and his successors to administer one of the largest land empires ever known, roughly 24 million square kilometers, without the benefit of cell towers or copy machines. Think about that. A message could leave Beijing and reach Baghdad in mere weeks. Some believe a top priority scroll could travel 200 miles in a single day under ideal conditions. But here's the quirky detail no one mentions. Some Yam stations kept falcons or even trained deer as mascots or stress relievers for weary riders. There's one mention of a deer named Timur Iron, who headbutted any courier who dared overstay their welcome. Historians still argue whether the Yam functioned as a formalized bureaucracy from the beginning, or if it evolved from the military supply lines that Genghis used in early campaigns. Some records suggest it was planned. Others hint it kind of happened, like an accidental potluck that grew into a city council. Either way, it worked. You swing your legs off the bench and groan softly. The next horse is ready, a dark bay with eyes too intelligent for your comfort. You pat its neck, and it flicks its ears as if to say, "Again?" "Yes, again." Outside, the sun has begun to set. Light stretches like melting butter across the grasslands. A cold breeze slides under your cloak. You pull the scroll tighter to your side. You think about the managers of this system-appointed officials, known as Yamchi. These guys weren't just glorified ticket punchers. They were crucial to making sure the empire ran. They kept logs, monitored riders, settled disputes, and occasionally had to deal with angry merchants or paranoid generals, wondering if their letters had been intercepted by bandits or bureaucrats. Speaking of bureaucrats, one of the lesser-known features of the Yam system was its use as a vehicle for tax collection. That's right. Among all the lightning-fast messages and top-secret intelligence were also some very disappointed peasants receiving notices of overdue tribute. Mongol efficiency didn't just inspire awe, it inspired audits. You mount up. One hand on the reins, one on the pouch holding your orders. You're not alone tonight. Another rider heads west with you, a young woman in a wool tunic who smells faintly of charcoal and apples. You exchange nods but no words. There's nothing to say. You're both shadows, now shadows stretched across an empire stitched together by hooves and silence. The Yam hums beneath you. Not in a literal sense, it's mostly mud and oats, but spiritually, it thrums with purpose. A network like this doesn't just carry messages, it carries presence. Genghis Khan might be 1,000 miles away, but when a courier gallops into your village bearing his seal, it's like he's right there, standing behind you, breathing down your neck. Comforting, right? The horse surges forward. Grass ripples in the wind like green water. Somewhere behind you, the station fades into the twilight. Ahead is another, and another, and another. The Yam never sleeps. You're galloping across a ribbon of earth that seems to stretch endlessly in both directions. No towns, no markers, just wind and sky and hoofbeats. And yet, you are not lost. You are exactly where you're meant to be, because you're part of something bigger now. You're not just a rider. You are a courier of the Khans. It sounds glamorous, doesn't it? Courier of the Khans. You imagine the title embroidered on a silk robe or carved into a gold medallion. But the truth is, no one signs up for this gig to get famous. In fact, if you're doing it right, no one should even remember your name. You're a ghost on horseback, a whisper stitched into the fabric of empire. Still, the job comes with perks. The couriers, called Gerd-o-Umlaut riders, named after the stations they serve, were an elite crew. Hardened, trusted, and capable of delivering a letter through a blizzard with a knife wound and a marmot chasing their heels. Mainstream. Historical fact. These messengers were hand-picked for their endurance, loyalty, and riding skill. Many were veterans. Some were nobles. Others, commoners who proved themselves by delivering one too many love letters faster than expected. In a society that prized speed and loyalty, couriers were both respected and feared. Your companion today is one of them. She's young, but the way she handles her horse, she's seen more of this steppe than most warlords. The only clue to her seniority is a metal clasp on her saddlebag, etched with a simple falcon, possibly a code, possibly a family crest, or maybe just a nod to a favorite bird. The gear you carry is standard: a short recurve bow, a knife, dried meat, and a waterproof pouch for scrolls. But it's your face, leathery from wind, lined with exhaustion, that marks you as a true courier. You've eaten more dried mutton than hot food, and your teeth rattle from weeks of riding. And still you ride. Some messages are tiny, just a folded scrap bearing a name and a command. Others are scrolls as long as your arm, sealed with wax so heavy it feels like a brick. The fancier the seal, the faster you're expected to ride. Anything bearing the royal tamga, the emblem of the Khan's authority, means clear the roads, kick the horse, and hope the wolves are feeling lazy. But not all deliveries are royal edicts. Some are updates on grain prices, some are requests for blankets or iron nails. Some are secret intelligence, encoded in simple sentences like, "The eagle has shed its feathers." Historians still argue whether these coded messages were part of a formal system, or if writers and scribes just made things up as they went. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. You'll remember your last long run, a 3-day sprint through mountain passes where every shadow looked like a bandit. The message? A simple letter from one noble's daughter to another, asking if her wedding dress had arrived. Did it feel ridiculous risking frostbite for silk gossip? Yes, but you rode anyway. That's the job. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some couriers developed their own riding songs, short, rhythmic chants they'd murmur under their breath to keep cadence. These weren't battle cries or folk ballads. They were functional. Think, "Don't fall asleep, don't drop the scroll, don't eat that glowing mushroom." Like mantras for surviving long hours with no podcasts. And then there were the scroll cases themselves, often carved wood or leather tubes, decorated with beads, feathers, or charms to ward off spirits. Superstition was part of the system. If a horse threw you twice on the same route, you switched saddles. If a message arrived with a cracked seal, the whole thing might be burned in a cleansing fire. Just in case, you're on hour 6 of today's leg, and your thighs feel like they're made of raw bread dough. Your horse is slowing, snorting clouds into the evening air. You scan the horizon for a flicker of smoke, the glint of iron that might be a station's weather vane or a yurt outlined by firelight. And there it is. Relief hums in your chest. You're almost there, but just before you reach the station, you see movement. 2 riders, not from your relay, cross your path. They nod solemnly, exchange nothing, and vanish westward. You wonder what they're carrying. War news? A recipe? A poem from a prince? You'll never know. The system isn't built for curiosity. Historians still puzzle over the lives of these couriers. Did they marry? Did they retire? Where are their names? Few records remain. Some were absorbed into military ranks. Others vanished into the wind. Their bones somewhere beneath the grasses they once galloped across. But in this moment, your name doesn't matter. You are the message now. You roll into the station, bones rattling, and hand off the pouch to a boy who disappears inside a felt-covered hut. No fanfare, no ceremony. Just a nod, and then another horse, already waiting. Another run begins. Your next horse is shorter than you expected and smells aggressively like onions. But it moves like wind over water. And that's what matters. You don't name these animals. Naming invites attachment, and attachment invites heartbreak. The Yan system doesn't pause for mourning. You adjust your saddlebag, glance at the horizon, and kick off again. Dust swirls. The world becomes hooves and heartbeat. By now, you're so deep in the relay you've forgotten the original message. It could be royal orders or an update on sheep inventory. Either way, it's no longer your business. You're a vessel, not a voice. Still, you marvel at how the Mongols keep the machine running. This isn't just about speed. It's about sanitation, security, and subtlety, all without the benefit of alcohol wipes or a functioning health department. Mainstream. Historical fact. The Mongols had surprisingly advanced systems for maintaining health along the Yam. Each station was expected to keep clean quarters, boiling water for food and drinking, and storage pits for waste that were regularly moved. This was no small feat in the middle of an empire stitched together by horses. And it worked. The spread of disease through the Yam network, while inevitable over time, was shockingly low given the volume of people and livestock constantly moving between stations. Of course, when the Black Death finally came, it didn't care much for station cleanliness. But that's a tale for another night. Today, though, you're riding clean. Every few hours you come to a checkpoint where your boots are inspected, your scroll casing wiped down, and your horse given a quick once-over for signs of rot, fatigue, or attitude. One Yam overseer, a broad-shouldered man with a gray beard, and a laugh like a stampede, tells you to dip your hands in a vinegar basin. Kills the demons, he says. Half joking. Probably. You do it anyway. Here's a quirky detail. Some stations insisted couriers chew juniper bark while riding. Supposedly, the smell kept flies and illness away. It also left your breath somewhere between forest breeze and overly aggressive incense stall. You make it to the next relay before dusk. The station here is larger than most, with a wooden palisade and a bell hanging from a crooked beam. You pull in, and before your boots even hit the ground, the scroll is gone, passed to a fresh rider who mounts and vanishes west without so much as a nod. And just like that, you're back in the rotation. You eat a slab of smoked yak. You drink water flavored with a hint of last week's goat stew. You nap for exactly 19 minutes. Then you're back in the saddle. There are guards at this station, 2 archers and 1 man who might just be a very angry cook, but their real job is security. The Mongol Empire didn't just protect its relay system. It defended it. Historians still argue whether the guards were locals pressed into service or specially appointed Yam enforcers with a kind of postal authority. Either way, they had the power to detain, question, and in extreme cases, execute anyone tampering with a message. One rider you heard about, somewhere near Bukhara, was ambushed by thieves. He threw his scrolls into a creek, dove after them, and emerged half dead but still gripping them in his teeth. Whether it's true or not, every courier repeats the story like a prayer. That's how sacred the cargo is. The Mongols understood. That information is power. Control the message, and you control the world. The Yam wasn't just a delivery system. It was a surveillance tool, a peacekeeper, a rumor sifter, and an empire-wide rumor vacuum. Everything passed through it: military orders, census data, merchant reports, even gossip about officials who were getting too ambitious. And the riders? They knew. They weren't just delivering parchment. They were delivering pressure points, little decisions that might start wars, move armies, or bankrupt cities. You feel it now. The weight of it. Not the scroll itself, that's light. But what's inside? And yet, you say nothing. You ride, you breathe. You adjust your scarf against the wind. Here's something strange. You've noticed. Every station smells a little different. One always smells like dried apricots, another like wool and smoke, another like mint and wet leather. No one talks about it, but every rider catalogs them in their mind. It's how you know you're still on track. It's how you navigate the world by scent. By the time you reach the next post, the stars are out. You dismount, hands numb, face wind-burned. Inside the yurt, a woman sings quietly to herself while stirring something thick and gray. You recognize the tune. It's a lullaby from the southern plains. Trouble? You ask. She shrugs. Scrolls came in with cracked seals, burned them, made tea instead. You nod. No one needs to say more. In this world, sometimes the message dies before it's born. And then the riders try again. You lie down near the fire, cloak wrapped tight. Another courier walks past you, boots muddy, face unreadable. You wonder what he's carrying. But you never ask. You close your eyes. Tomorrow. The relay rides on. The next morning, you wake to frost on your eyelashes and the low muttering of horses chewing hay outside the yurt. You sit up, bones cracking like old scrolls, and stretch in the dim light filtering through the tent's smoke hole. Another day. Another 100 miles. Another message whose contents you'll never know, but whose urgency hums in your bones. You reach for your satchel, but before you can even tighten the leather strap, a station keeper enters. He's missing 2 fingers, and wears a robe stitched with odd spiral patterns, as if his tunic used to be a tent in a former life. He doesn't say much. Just hands you something that glints in the firelight, a pesa. Now this is more than a badge. This is a passport, a power token, a get-out-of-jail-free card on horseback. Holding a pesa is like being wrapped in Genghis Khan's own permission. Slip with it, doors open, horses are handed over. Stew bowls are filled. And no one dares slow you down. Mainstream historical fact, a pesa, or jerej, depending on the region, was an inscribed metal tablet carried by official envoys of the Mongol Empire. Issued in various levels of authority, some allowed the bearer to requisition horses and supplies, while others could demand shelter, protection, or even command local officials to assist in their mission. You tuck the pesa into your belt where it clinks, faintly against your knife. You're not supposed to flash it around. Modesty was a virtue even for couriers, but sometimes you have to show it when things get tense. Like that time a suspicious village elder thought you were a horse thief with a scroll fetish. One flash of your pesa, and suddenly you were being offered lamb skewers and an awkward foot massage. Here's a quirky bit. Some pesa tokens were inset with mother-of-pearl or tiny jade discs, and a few elite ones were supposedly blessed by shamans to repel lies or banish fog. Whether this was for actual weather or just metaphorical misdirection is still up for debate, like most things involving Mongol mysticism. Today, the pesa gets you a top-tier horse, sleek, sure-footed, and with a mane braided in a curious crisscross pattern. The station keeper calls him temer, which means iron, fitting, considering the horse's stubbornness and general refusal to acknowledge your existence as a sentient being. You ride. With a pesa, the yam becomes a different world. It's not just yurts and fire pits anymore. It's gates that open before you arrive, supplies brought before you ask, even merchants who stop mid-deal to let you pass through their tents. You're part of the bloodstream now, but with a badge that says, "I'm the oxygen." Historians still argue whether every courier carried a pesa, or if only high-level envoys and imperial messengers had them. Some accounts suggest that ordinary relay riders used verbal passwords instead, changing weekly, coded in phrases like "silver sun westbound" or "the wheat bows at night." Others believe lower-ranked riders simply carried copies made of bone or wood, with basic credentials etched into them. Pesa envy must have been a real thin dot as you ride through a mountain pass that smells like pine needles and old snow. You pass a merchant caravan, their camels laden with textiles and dried plums. One of them eyes the glint of your pesa and quickly ushers his men aside. You nod in thanks but say nothing. You don't speak unless spoken to. That's the yam way. You stop at a particularly large station by midday, a fortress-like outpost with guard towers and multiple yurts. It's a major hub, one where messages are rerouted, fresh horses are rotated hourly, and sometimes even a noble will drop by on the way to an arranged marriage or diplomatic mission. Inside, the walls are covered in message logs, thin strips of bamboo inscribed with names, dates, routes. A clerk with smudged ink fingers checks your papers. She sees your pesa and bows slightly before handing you a fresh pouch. You're being reassigned new direction, new mission. Apparently, a caravan went missing near the eastern tributary, and the Khan wants answers, and when the Khan wants answers, the yam delivers. You eat a chunk of dried cheese that could easily double as a projectile weapon, and drink something that might be tea or might be horse sweat. Either way, it's hot, and it works. You don't know where the next leg will take you, only that your path is lit not by lamps, but by authority carved into a little piece of metal at your hip. That night, as you camp beneath a sky woven with stars, you hold the pesa in your hand, running your thumb over the worn inscription. It's not fancy, just a few words, but they're enough to move mountains, or at least move you past them. The wind howls through the valley. Your horse nickers. In the dark, tomorrow you ride again, and you don't need to shout. The next morning, your pesa earns you more than just a horse. It gets you a meal that doesn't taste like regret. Roasted marmot, crispy skin, a pinch of salt even. It's the courier's equivalent of a birthday cake. You sit cross-legged by the station hearth, licking grease off your fingers while watching a boy polish saddles with a strip of dog hair. There's a certain rhythm to it, the brush-swish thud of yam life. And before long, you're called outside. Your new mount, a shaggy gray with attitude issues, is pawing the dirt impatiently. You're heading deep into the western plains now, across stretches where yam stations grow sparse and the land yawns wider between stops. This is where the system stretches to its limits, and you're about to learn how it survives. You mount and ride hard, hooves muffled on packed earth. Your satchel holds grain-packed whey bread and 2 scrolls, one sealed in black wax. Black wax means, don't lose this unless you want the Khan's grandson showing up personally to ask why. Mainstream historical fact, the yam stations were stocked not only with food for riders, but with vast stores of hay, grain, and dried fodder for horses. These supplies were managed by station families and monitored by regional officials. Some major stations even had full-time grooms and veterinarians. The Mongol relay was not a casual hobby, it was a logistical masterpiece, and it had to be. On some days, hundreds of horses moved through a single yam post. Each needed food, water, shelter. Multiply that by 1,000 stations, and you've got yourself an empire-sized pantry. Feed the couriers. Fuel the flow. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. The Mongols fed their horses boiled millet mash with animal fat during winter campaigns. It sounds like breakfast porridge for athletes, and that's basically what it was: dense calories to keep the ponies charging across icy terrain. Is for you. You get dried curds and a pouch of air-dried mutton jerky that tastes like leather and ambition. The land here is tougher. Fewer trees. Wind that feels like it's trying to strip your thoughts from your skull. But you press on. At one stop, a woman hands you a cup of kumis fermented mare's milk. It bubbles, it smells hopeful. You drink, smile politely, and try not to wince. Historians still argue whether kumis was truly a staple of Mongol couriers, or if it was more a regional indulgence. Some say it kept the gut flora stable. Others say it sent messengers sprinting for the nearest shrub. The truth, as usual, likely depends on your constitution, but the fuel mattered. Riders burned thousands of calories a day, not just from riding, but from the sheer stress of staying alert. You weren't just delivering mail. You were navigating unfamiliar terrain, dodging bandits, fording rivers, and figuring out how to sleep on a horse without falling off. All while keeping the scroll dry and your eyebrows attached. At another post, you catch sight of a full-blown supply hub, small camp bustling with activity. Station workers unload bundles of hay from a cart, weigh them with a hand scale, and jot measurements onto birch bark tags. You see a wall of horseshoes stacked like dried herbs, and a woman stirring a vat of boiled linseed for saddle repairs. Every part of the system runs on something, and every something has a steward someone. tasked with making sure the couriers don't collapse halfway between Karakorum and Kabul. That night, you sleep next to the horses. Not in a pen, no, that's for the pampered. You're in a makeshift lean-to, your cloak your pillow, your boots still on because let's be honest, you're not outrunning anyone barefoot. You chew on roasted millet wrapped in a leaf and stare. At the stars. You think about the letter in your satchel. Who's waiting on it? Is it news of peace or war? An order to invade? A letter home? You'll never know. But you'll carry it just the same. And in the silence, with only the wind brushing the tall grass and the muffled huff of sleeping horses, you feel it, the faint hum of the yam, still moving, still fed, still alive. The wind is different today, drier, grainier. It smells like copper and cracked leather and some vague memory of fire. You ride with one eye on the sky, because the clouds are starting to stack like piles of wet wool, and your horse, bless his stumpy determination, has begun to twitch his ears in that way that says, storm's coming. But maps? No, you don't carry maps. You navigate by memory, instinct, and the odd signs scattered across the steppe. A crooked tree near a creek means turn west. A pile of stones, whitewashed by the sun, marks the fork between famine and the next station. If you're lucky, you'll see a bone-white yak skull on a stick, somebody's warning, or maybe just avant-garde Mongol art. Either way, you steer clear. Mainstream historical fact: Mongol couriers didn't use paper maps for their routes. Instead, they memorized waypoints, natural landmarks, scent trails, and shared oral instructions handed down from rider to rider. This allowed them to ride even in poor weather or under moonlight. It also meant that experienced couriers became living atlases, their brains crowded with thousands of miles worth of turns, stops, and terrain quirks. Right now, your brain is working overtime. You're passing a salt flat that shimmers deceptively. In the heat, the air warps. Mirage pools flicker in and out of existence. You know better than to veer off the path, even if your mouth is drier than yesterday's yak loaf. Here's the fringe detail: some yam riders could smell their route. Literally. Certain patches of the plains had distinctive scents: sagebrush, wild onion, mineral dust from dry creek beds. Riders used these olfactory breadcrumbs to guide themselves, especially during sandstorms or when night blotted out everything but the sound of hooves. You're starting to understand how a whiff of something sharp and metallic hits your nose. Sulfur, maybe. You squint. Up ahead, faint smoke. A station? Or just a cooking fire? You approach slowly. Not all fires are friendly. Turns out, it's a lone herder, camped off the road. His goats bleed in a circle around him, like he's their tiny, grumpy king. He gives you water cold, pulled from a stone-lined well, and offers a lump of fat rolled in flour. It's chewy, salty, and somehow reassuring. He nods at the sky, says, "Ride hard. The steppe is whispering wrong things today." You thank him and continue. The road ahead isn't really a road, it's a memory corridor, carved into the minds of couriers like the one who rides just behind you now. You recognize her, again, same red scarf tied around her wrist. The unspoken camaraderie of the relay, always together, yet never speaking. You know the terrain is about to change when the wind shifts direction and the birds disappear. Flat grassland gives way to low hills and rocky outcrops. A pass, narrow and shaded, looms ahead. You nudge your horse forward cautiously. No trail markers, no stone piles. Just your gut, which by now operates with GPS-level precision. You follow. A dry creek bed that eventually curves into a familiar break in the rocks. That's your sign. You're still on course. Historians still argue whether the Mongols ever formalized their oral navigation techniques. Did they train apprentices in specific paths? Or was it simply learned on the job, passed in hushed, half-grunted instructions? At stations, some think they used carved sticks as mnemonic devices. Others claim they sang their directions into memory, like a topographical lullaby. The truth, as usual, is probably both and neither. You remember one station keeper years ago, a half-blind elder who could still describe every turn on the northern route by referencing smells, rocks, and how the sun felt on his left cheek. You'd thought he was mad until you tried it. He wasn't wrong. Now you rely on those same feelings. The sun on your jaw, the scent of dust warmed by lichen, the faint slope of the land beneath your horse's hooves. It's not perfect. Once, a rider veered off course and ended up delivering a war summons to a hermit monk growing onions on a cliff. The monk reportedly agreed to lead a battalion just to see how the story ended. You're lucky today. By late afternoon, a yam banner flutters on the ridge, a simple cloth square tied to a branch, half shredded but still standing. You made it. The station is half hidden behind a low rise, protected from the worst of the wind. It's quiet. 1. Man sharpening a blade. A woman braiding horsehair into rope. They nod but don't ask questions. You've arrived. That's all that matters. You hand off your scroll. A new one is placed in your pouch. You refill your waterskin, roll your neck, and stretch your aching knees. Then you're off again. You don't need directions. The land knows you. It starts with a low rumble. Not thunder, not quite. More like the groan of something ancient shifting beneath the earth. Your horse stops, ears swiveling. You glance up at the sky, expecting clouds, but it's clear, too clear. The blue stretches, taut and unforgiving. Then comes the wind. Sudden, sharp, cold. Enough to sting your teeth. This is the steppes idea of a surprise party. You wrap your scarf tighter and lean forward, urging your horse into a steady pace. You've got 2 more stations to reach before dusk, and now the weather's plotting against you. Welcome to the glamorous life of a yam courier, always wet, always cold, and always mildly threatened by nature. Mainstream historical fact: the Mongol couriers were trained to ride through all weather, rain, snow, hail, blistering sun. They had no off days. The yam didn't stop because of inclement weather. It adapted. Riders wrapped themselves in layers of felt, oiled their scroll pouches, and braved everything from desert sandstorms to mountain blizzards. And now it's your turn. The first flakes hit your cheeks, just before the hills flatten out. Snow, late. Spring, and it's snowing. The Mongol Empire plays by its own rules. You shift your weight in the saddle, letting your horse find its own path. These animals are better at this than you are. They instinctively know where to step, when to pause, how to lower their heads to keep the wind from freezing their brains. You trust them the way you trust your lungs. Here's a fringe detail. Some couriers carried felt mittens stuffed with dried herbs, lavender, juniper, or even garlic, supposedly to warm the hands, repel illness, or just keep the worst smells at bay. You've got garlic-stuffed gloves yourself, and the effect is polarizing. But weather is only part of the battle. The other half? Wildlife. Wolves, bears, occasionally a disgruntled lynx with nothing better to do than remind you of your own fragility. You've heard stories. Riders chased by packs of steppe wolves, scrolls clenched between their teeth. One guy supposedly delivered a treaty with a dislocated shoulder and 2 wolves hanging off his saddle blanket. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. You ride as if it is. You spot movement ahead, just a shimmer. You slow down. Bandits? Merchants? Another courier? Turns out to be a pair of nomads herding sheep. They wave lazily. One shouts something about the weather being cooperative, which feels like sarcasm. You nod and keep riding. Soon the terrain changes again. Low marsh, slippery, and slick. You pass through carefully, hooves squelching with every step. Your horse doesn't like it. Neither do you. But the message must move, and so must you. At the next station, you find the fire already lit. A tall woman with soot on her cheek hands you a bowl of hot soup. You don't ask what's in it. It smells like roots and regret. but it warms your chest and that's enough. You trade scrolls. Rub the frost from your saddle straps and don't waste time with chatter. There's a fresh mount waiting, this one black as ink, with scars around its flanks that tell their own stories. The handler calls him Zud, which is what locals call a particularly cruel winter. Comforting. Historians still argue whether the yam had formal weather forecasting. Some say station keepers use smoke signals or mirrored discs to warn about storms. Others believe each courier relied solely on instinct, animal behavior, and a kind of creaky knee wisdom passed down through experience. One thing is clear, you were never unprepared. Riders wore layered robes lined with wool or rabbit fur. Waterproof scroll cases were reinforced with wax and horn caps. Saddlebags were oiled against rain. Every part of your kit was designed to survive when you couldn't. And sometimes, you didn't. There's a grave just outside this station. A simple wooden marker, no name. Just a carved arrow pointing west. A reminder that not every courier makes it to the next station. But the message? It always does. You leave the soup half finished, adjust your scarf again, and mount Zud. Snow's easing now. The sky's gone pewter gray. But the wind, it never quite leaves. Your next stop is 3 hills away. Just 3 dot, but between here and there lies the wild. You ride anyway, because that's what the yam requires. You've made it over the hills. Your breath fogs in the chill, but the sun peeks through, melting the frost off your cloak like a warm apology. The next station is a low, rounded yurt nestled beside a crooked stream. You dismount stiffly, legs wobbling, and stretch your arms until your shoulders crack. Inside the yurt, the air smells like barley, sweat, and damp felt. A boy hands you a scroll pouch, but this time he raises an eyebrow. Not royal, he says. Domestic run. And that means something different, because not everything in the yam is about empires, treaties, and declarations of war. Sometimes, the messages you carry are downright human. Today's ride isn't a grand mission. It's a set of personal letters. One from a merchant to his cousin in Samarkand about a bad shipment of wool. Another from a noblewoman asking about her sisters. Newborn, and strangely a tightly wrapped bundle containing a pair of chopsticks, an apology. And what you suspect might be a recipe. Mainstream historical fact. Though the yam system was state-run and primarily served military and political ends, it also allowed for limited private correspondence, especially between nobles, officials, and wealthy merchants. If you had the right connections or paid a fee, your letter could ride alongside royal decrees. You slip the pouch into your satchel and ride on. The wind is gentler now, the terrain more forgiving. No wolves today. Just you, the saddle, and a small bag full of lives waiting to unfold. Here's a quirky tidbit. There are records scattered, barely legible, of marriage proposals sent via yam couriers. One famously awkward run involved a 3-part letter. The proposal, the family's terms, and the bride's acceptance, all exchanged by couriers over the span of a month and a half. Romantic? Sure. Efficient? Debatable. You remember a similar moment, a rider you passed once holding a scroll wrapped in blue silk. That color, in some tribes, signified birth announcements. You wonder if it was a boy or girl. Today's delivery takes you through a valley where the air smells like sage and damp moss. A shepherd waves at you from a hillside, his goats trotting like over-caffeinated clouds behind him. You wave back because today feels light. This isn't empire business. It's everyday life, wrapped in parchment, but even personal messages carry weight. Historians still argue whether these domestic runs were officially tracked. Some believe riders were encouraged to slip in extra deliveries as a way to keep the local economy spinning. Others suggest there were secret ledgers lists of who sent what, to whom, and for how much. Yam gossip recorded by scribes who probably pretended they didn't enjoy it. You pass a caravan camped along the road, silk traders from the east. judging by the brocade patterns visible in their saddle blankets. One of them whistles a tune you half recognize, a market jingle turned riding song. You stop long enough to accept a strip of dried apple and share a swig of water. One of them asks if you're headed to Khotan. You shake your head. Only two. The river bend. They nod, no more questions. Everyone on the road knows the rules. Couriers don't linger. The station at the bend is smaller than most, just one yurt and a stable. An old man sits out front carving tiny wooden horses with comically angry faces. He squints at your satchel, then motions to a girl who takes it, and disappears inside. You stretch your legs, sit on a stump, and eat a dumpling you're pretty sure used to be a turnip. A dog with one ear missing stares at you as if he's the local tax collector. This place is slower, calmer, maybe even forgettable. And yet, the messages you carried here might ripple for years. That wool shipment could bankrupt a cousin. The apology letter might mend a decades-old family feud. The recipe could become a household staple or spark another noodle rivalry across the river. The yam isn't just about power. It's about people. You rest a moment longer, then rise. The girl returns with a fresh pouch, 2 messages, one sealed with red twine. You don't ask. You never do. As you mount up again, the one-eared dog barks twice. Just once for strangers, twice for friends. That's what the old couriers used to say. You smile, then ride. Your horse's hooves thud against damp ground as you head north along a pine-dappled ridge. The trees here stand taller, like guards who've forgotten what they're guarding. Birds dart from branch to branch, chirping in fast Morse code. You're not sure if it's cheerful or foreboding. The scroll pouch at your side is lighter now, just one scroll, bound in copper thread. And the station mistress back at the river had raised an eyebrow when she handed it to you. "Don't read it," she'd said, with a smile that wasn't quite a smile. You wouldn't dream of it. Mostly because you're tired. And breaking imperial scrolls is the sort of thing that shortens your life expectancy. The message is marked with a faint red X, one of the known symbols for Yam intelligence dispatches. Mainstream historical fact. The Mongol Empire used the Yam system not only for military and administrative communication, but for high-level intelligence gathering and reporting. Couriers often carried coded messages, surveillance updates, and summaries of intercepted foreign communications. Some posts even used signal towers fueled by dried dung and brush to relay urgent information by fire, like a whisper of flame across the continent. And here's where things get cloak and horse dagger. You ride past a bare hilltop with a single tower rising from its crown, a fire beacon. Blackened from past use, quiet now, but still watching. Signal fires were rarely used, but when they were, it meant something urgent: an invasion, an uprising, or a really disappointing tribute shipment. Light one flame, and the next tower kindles. Theirs. Within hours, a message can pass hundreds of miles, burning silently through the sky. Of course, it wasn't precise. You couldn't exactly communicate, "We're out of yak butter at Station 37. But danger approaching from the west? That worked fine. As for secret codes, some scholars say Mongol couriers carried encrypted slips written in symbolic shorthand, known only to imperial scribes. Others suggest a more tactile method: knots in string, ink on bone, patterns sewn into cloak hems. Some of it feels like fantasy. But the Empire worked. So something was working. Your scroll today is sealed tight, but the material is odd thicker than parchment, almost like barkcloth, and you swear you can feel tiny bumps under the surface. Not writing markings. Some kind of code, maybe. You press on, eyes sweeping the trail. This part of the route is quiet. Too quiet. The birds have vanished. Even the insects seem to be waiting. A figure steps into your path, tall, hooded, not armed exactly, but his stance is practiced. Yam security? Or something else? You reach for your pesa. He sees it, nods, and steps aside. You exhale. Then gallop. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some couriers carried backup scrolls hidden in their boot linings, or even sewn into the padding of their saddles. If attacked or ambushed, they could hand over a decoy, something dull, like tax statistics, or an outdated sheep census, while preserving the real message. Whether that's what you're carrying now, you don't know. But it feels like one of those scrolls. By mid-afternoon, you reach a half-buried station built into the side of a bluff. It's camouflaged intentionally. You dismount, announce yourself softly, and wait. The door opens inward, and a woman, with ink-stained fingers, ushers you inside. No one speaks. You hand over the pouch. She doesn't even glance at it, just places it into a bronze tube and seals the cap with wax. Behind her, you notice a series of painted slats leaning against the wall. Black triangles, blue circles, red slashes. Not art, messages. Historians still argue whether Mongol intelligence relied more on written records or memorized reports. Some say trained messengers were also informants, storing snippets of intelligence in memory and delivering them verbally at imperial court. Others believe the Mongols preferred written control paper, bark, or wood, documented and archived. You tend to believe both. You've seen riders muttering to themselves for hours, lips repeating something only their minds could follow. As you rest that evening, seated cross-legged beside a brazier, one of the station workers offers you a small bowl of honeyed nuts. A luxury. You chew slowly, scanning the faces around the fire. No one's looking at you, but everyone knows what passed through your hands today. Tomorrow, you'll be back on a milk run. But tonight, you were a ghost carrying secrets. Part of the silent conversation that keeps empires from falling. And you didn't yell a word. You leave the bluff station before dawn, your breath clouding in the pale gray light. The message has been passed. The shadows have retreated. Now you're just a courier again. No secrets, no glinting seals. Just one very long road ahead and a new pouch of far more mundane scrolls strapped to your side. You're heading south now, toward a busier corridor of the Yam. The terrain begins to soften. Rolling hills, grassy fields, patches of tilled farmland. The wind smells like animals and ash. You pass ox carts, shepherds, even a trio of monks sharing dried fruit and laughter as they walk barefoot through the dust. You wave. They nod. Everyone knows who you are. The Yam isn't just a messenger system. It's a symbol, a moving artery of the Empire's will. And over time, the world has taken notice. Mainstream historical fact. As the Mongol Empire expanded, the Yam's influence reached beyond simple communication. Chinese administrators took note of its structure and incorporated similar postal elements during the Yuan dynasty. European visitors like Marco Polo marveled at the system's efficiency, calling it one of the greatest wonders of the empire. Venetian traders, Persian scribes, Russian princes, they all observed and in some ways adopted Yam-inspired logistics in their own realms. You reach a wide valley crisscrossed with trade roads. Silk caravans trundle eastward, flanked by guards with curved sabers and fur-trimmed boots. Spices from India, furs from the north, sapphires, bolts of brocade, glassware packed in straw. Some of the traders nod as you ride past. Others give you wide berth. They know your horse won't stop for anything that doesn't bleed. Here's a quirky tidbit. In certain towns along the trade routes, couriers were welcomed with trumpet fanfare, not for their status, but to warn townsfolk to stay out of the road. One misstep in front of a Yam rider could cost a wagon its axle, or worse, a merchant his patience. You dismount at the next station, a large walled compound with stables, kitchens, and a watchtower. The place buzzes with motion riders swapping satchels, clerks scribbling entries into ledgers, cooks stirring bubbling pots of something that smells like meat and regret. You lean against the doorway, chewing on a chunk of bread that seems to have been baked sometime during the Bronze Age. It's hard, but warm, and it makes you feel almost civilized again. Then the station keeper calls your name, or at least a reasonable attempt at it. New scrolls, he says. Southbound, trade permits. Military requisitions, complaint from a monastery about loud goats. You nod, swap satchels, and stretch your back. Same ride, different day. But as you head out, something catches your eye. An elderly man crouched beside a low table, arranging small clay tiles. You glance closer. The tiles are etched with symbols, roots, numbers. He's mapping the yam. You dismount again, crouch beside him. He doesn't speak, but points to a line drawn across 4 tiles. You recognize it. That was your path last week. The same valleys, the same stations. Historians still argue whether the Mongols ever kept full yam maps. Some claim they existed only in memory couriers and station masters holding fragments of the system in their minds. Others point to archaeological finds, clay tiles, bamboo scrolls, even annotated saddle blankets. Whatever the truth, what you're seeing now feels like a rare moment of clarity in a job built on motion. You nod to the old man, remount, and keep riding. Hours later, you pass a caravan camp where the scent of grilled lamb wafts on the breeze. A merchant leans out of his tent and shouts something about saddle balm. You shout back, "No time." He laughs. "Of course not. Yam doesn't sleep." Exactly. The terrain shifts again. Low river plains, clustered farms, boys herding ducks. One waves and runs beside your horse for a full minute before turning back. You smile to yourself. You realize, not for the first time, that you're not just part of the Mongol Empire. You're part of something larger, a system that stretches beyond borders, beyond rulers, beyond wars. The yam is becoming a template, a model, a language of movement and speed that other civilizations will borrow, reshape, and claim as their own. You deliver your scrolls that evening at a lush station beside a wide river. The postmaster greets you with tea, no questions asked. You sit, quietly watching the boats drift past. And somewhere far away, someone you'll never meet is opening a scroll you carried and building something with it. You don't notice the saddle sores until you sit down to sleep. Then, oh, there they are, like a constellation of regrets just under your skin. But you don't complain. You can't. The yam doesn't pause for comfort. This station is small, remote, mud-walled and mossy, tucked between 2 cypress groves that hum when the wind threads through. There's a single fire pit, a stable, and a bench shaped more by use than design. You're the only courier here tonight, and it's quiet, in a way that feels suspicious. A woman, older than the hills and tougher than any of them, hands you a bowl of stew and asks, "Anything broken?" You shake your head. She nods, satisfied. Not yet. But not all stations are this serene. Some break. Some burn. Because sometimes the yam fails. Mainstream historical fact. For all its glory, the yam system had weak points. It relied heavily on local cooperation, discipline, and well-fed horses. If a region rebelled, suffered famine, or was raided by enemies, entire sections could collapse. There were times when stations were abandoned, horses stolen, or couriers disappeared. Messages delayed meant consequences, sometimes war, sometimes worse. You remember your worst run. A relay had gone dark. 2 stations, gone silent. You were ordered to ride through anyway. No fresh horses. No hot meals, no human voices. Just 2 charred yurts and the smell of scorched wool. Bandits, enemy scouts, a drunken fire. No one ever told you. You buried the bodies and rode on, one hand on your bow the whole way. That scroll still reached its destination. And this isn't rare. Across the empire, cracks appear. Sabotage, weather, politics. Even scrolls get forged. Fakers crafting fake pesa, demanding food and shelter, undermining the system one greedy impersonator at a time. Historians still argue over how common this kind of yam corruption was. Some sources suggest it was widespread by the later Mongol years. Others insist it was rare, punished swiftly, and more urban legend than systemic rot. But you've seen a fake peso once. It was too shiny. The etchings were too clean. The man holding it? Too nervous. You let it pass. You were young. Regret still rides with you. Here's a fringe detail. Some station keepers developed secret code scratches on posts. Colored thread in the yurt flaps, song sung in reverse to signal when a station had been compromised. A kind of courier Morse, silent but sharp. You learn to read it. You have to. Tonight, the station is intact, but the scroll you're handed is damp. Someone dropped it in a stream. You don't ask. You just dry it near the fire, turn it twice, and rewrap it carefully. Your horse tomorrow will be half lame. You'll walk part of the leg, cursing softly at every rock. But you'll deliver it. Because if you don't, someone, somewhere might make a decision based on yesterday's information. And that's how empires crumble. You eat your stew. It tastes like cabbage and loyalty. Outside, thunder rolls. The fire pops. And the yam shivers just a little. Rain again. Always rain when your boots have just started to feel dry. You ride through it anyway. Cloak pulled tight. Droplets sliding off your hood and soaking into your collar like they've been waiting all week for the privilege. Your horse doesn't care. He's trudging forward with that look of long-suffering stoicism only a step pony can wear. A kind of equine. Eye roll with every hoof beat dot as the sky turns the color of wet clay. You can't help thinking about all the riders before you, the scrolls they carried, the ones they lost, the ones that were never meant to arrive, because for all its strengths, the speed, the power, the sheer reach, the yam was not perfect. Even now, with a well-oiled saddle and the gleam of your pesa at your side, you feel the small fractures in the system. Riders disappearing, messages intercepted, scrolls misrouted. And maybe, just maybe, a few riders who went rogue. Mainstream historical fact. Over time, the yam grew vulnerable to internal exploitation. Station corruption increased under weaker cans, bribes were accepted. Riders siphoned off rations or hoarded horses. Some officials forged messages or misused their authority to seize resources from local populations. Trust eroded. The arteries of the empire began to clog. And yet, like your sore horse, it limped forward. Here's a quirky little nugget. Some records suggest that unscrupulous traders would follow yam couriers at a distance, using their established safety and clear paths to shortcut through dangerous regions. A courier paved the way. The merchant profited. Sometimes they even hired riders to carry fake messages just to create cover for their caravans. You stop at a station that looks fine on the outside wooden fence in place. Fire lit, horses visible, but something's off. No one greets you. No one checks your satchel. The yurt flap is half open, swaying in the breeze like an invitation or a warning. You dismount slowly, hand near your knife dot inside. A boy no older than 10 looks up from a table. He's alone, cooking something that smells like onions and fear. His father, he says, went out last week, didn't come back. You don't ask more. You don't have to. You swap scrolls with shaking hands. Thank him with your eyes. Then leave. Historians still argue whether the breakdown of the yam began under Kublai Khan's later reign, or if it eroded slowly after the empire's fragmentation. Some say regional rulers left to govern themselves after Genghis's direct. Heirs lost control, cut funding, or commandeered yam supplies for personal use. Others argue it was inevitable. Systems stretch. And eventually, they tear. You press onward through a wooded pass, eyes sharp for anything that might look like a bandit or a broken station. The rain slows. Mist curls around your horse's legs like it's trying to pull you off course. But you know the way. Even when the roads fail, the rider remembers. You think of the yam not as a system now, but as a memory stitched into land. And bone, passed through generations of riders, handlers, station keepers, and even that scared little boy in the yurt. It's still here. Just quieter. Tonight, you sleep under a lean-to of bark and damp pine boughs. No station nearby, no fire. You eat cold millet mash with a slice of something that might have once been a turnip. The scroll at your side is safe, wrapped in oiled cloth, guarded by your own spine curled around it. You dream of riders without names, galloping through time. Historians still study the yam like a map drawn in fog, parts of it clear, the rest fading before fingers can trace the lines. Distances argued, horse diets contested, daily schedules mostly guessed, but the riders knew. And tonight, you do too. Even broken, the yam whispers, and you are still listening. It's nearly dawn. The sky hasn't decided on its color yet, just a slow drift from charcoal to pewter. You're almost there. The edge of the empire. The last station before the coast. Your horse's steps grow slower, not from fatigue, but from recognition. This path is familiar. You've ridden it before twice, maybe 3 times. The ground hums with memory, soft underfoot. The grass curling in tufts like it's waiting to be trampled by something important. And today, that something is you. There's only one scroll in your pouch now, just one, sealed in plain wax. Number. Royal crest. No colored twine, nothing fancy. But you've carried it farther than most, through storms and silence, betrayal and boredom, wolves and one very angry goose near the mountain pass. You round a bend and see it. The final yam station. Low roof, wide door, flags curled in the sea air. Beyond it, past a line of salt-bleached trees, you glimpse mist rolling off the ocean. You've made it. 6,000 miles. More, maybe. You stopped counting sometime back in your second saddle. Mainstream historical fact. The yam system, stretched from China's Pacific coast all the way to Eastern Europe, one of the longest, most continuous communication systems in pre-modern history. It allowed the Mongol Empire to function with astonishing speed, coordinating trade, military movements, taxation, and diplomacy across a patchwork of regions and languages. But here's something few. Remember, the final stations often looked nothing like the heartland hubs. They were lonelier, harsher. Sometimes they weren't stations at all, just a hut, a pier, or a cave with a tethered goat, and a barely functional postmaster with more dogs than teeth. This one is better than that. You hand off your scroll to a man whose hands are ink-stained and weathered. He nods once, disappears into the building, and doesn't return. You wait. Just for a moment. Then your fingers unclench, your spine finally unwinds. You sit. Not because someone told you to, but because finally you can. You've reached the edge, and it's strange, isn't it? The whole world feels smaller now. You've crossed continents, outrun snowstorms, slept beside strangers and ghosts, and delivered everything from declarations of war to dinner invitations, all without raising your voice. Historians still argue what became of the yam once the Mongol Empire fractured. Some pieces endured for centuries, absorbed into Russian, Chinese, and Persian postal systems. Others vanished, stations abandoned, routes forgotten, the horses sold or set free. But you know the truth. The yam never vanished. It simply faded into the land that carried it. Here's one last quirky note. Some retiring riders buried their pesa beneath specific trees, poplars, usually, or junipers, believing that as long as it remained in the earth, the road would remember them. Some of those trees still stand, bent with age, humming faintly when the wind hits just right. As the sun lifts over the sea, you close your eyes and let it wash your face. The empire hums behind you. The scroll has reached its end, and so have you. Let's stay here a little while longer. You're no longer on the saddle. Your body no longer aches with the rhythm of hooves, and the dust of this steppe has settled softly onto the past. There's a calm here, At the edge of the world. No messages left to carry. No scrolls waiting for hands to deliver them. Just the hush of the waves, rising and falling like a lullaby older than empire. Your fingers rest on the worn leather of your satchel, but it's light now, empty. Finished. And yet, in the stillness, you could almost feel the trail behind you. Every station, every fire, every whispered instruction passed from one rider to another. The road still lives inside you. Even now, you carry the rhythm of the yam in your chest. Let your breath slow. Inhale like the plains broad and steady. Exhale like the coast gentle, rolling endless. The wind here smells like salt and pine and something older. Parchment, perhaps, or the faint echo of hooves on grass. You're safe now. No wolves, no storms. Just the soft weight of sleep, tugging gently at your shoulders. You've ridden across an empire. You've whispered across centuries. And now you rest. Close your eyes, courier. Let the road be quiet. Just for tonight. End of script. Sweet dreams.